Good afternoon. There we go. Hey everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Ray Lathrop and I'm the manager here of S.Nevada Strong. I want to welcome you all today. Thank you so much for coming. I know you guys are all very busy and important people to take some time and join our little workshop. Little housekeeping, there is still coffee and sweets on the back table. Please make sure to eat those so that we don't have to. And then right outside this door, down the hallways a little bit, is a bathroom on your right. So feel free to get up. Today's going to be a little bit more interactive than our first workshop. So please feel free to move around. I did want to go over a little bit about what we're here to do today and why we're here to do it. I think it's really important to set the context for kind of why we keep pulling people together to talk more and more about grants. For those of you who missed our first workshop or some of the work that we did last year, this will give you kind of caught up to speed. So S.Nevada Strong is our regional policy plan aiming at 20 years of vision around the future here for Southern Nevada. What does a community want to look like? What do we want to be when we grow up? We want better jobs, we want better education system, a more connected built environment, and a better quality of life for all residents. During the S.Nevada Strong regional planning process, which took a few years, implementation and those next steps for the regional plan are both funded and unfunded. And so when we started talking about what is an implementation office, one of the first things that came to mind was, how do we build capacity to increase the funding here in Southern Nevada for implementation? So we brought together a couple key stakeholders and are looking at a couple strategies to make sure that we not just get more revenue for each individual player and stakeholder that we work with, but overall increase the pie of revenue here in Southern Nevada and in Nevada in general. So we set our stakes high at trying to increase some of the competitiveness of the federal grant applications that we submit, and also do a better job to manage those grants and to get better outputs from them. So a lot of what we're doing in this workshop and in the one apparently that's on YouTube from March, which you can go and watch, as well as the next two that we'll host, we'll be talking a lot more about doing what we do best, like you guys here in the room, and doing it more often. So we want to give a little bit of thanks to some of our regional project partners, the Gwynn Center, the Nevada Community Foundation, United Way, the State Grants Office. We all kind of pulled together early in 2017 to start talking about what would a strategic framework for getting better at grant applications would look like. And with the help of many grant writers, some of which you guys are here, and we thank you so much for your time, we pulled together one strategic document that's posted on our website that kind of breaks out how do we get better at grants. We get better at grants in two ways. One, aligning goals throughout our community and our state and with the federal government that we work with, all of the different departments. So it's kind of a relationship building and a community building strategy. And two, we get better at technical skills. We get better at, being experts at writing grants and managing grants. So we want you to make sure that you look at that framework online. It was a real collaborative process to build that, and I think the work that we've done from that framework is very emblematic of how many participants we had and how many voices were heard during that process. And so we thank everybody who's been a part of that process from the beginning, and also for all of you newcomers, we're excited that you're here and that the word is spreading from what we're doing. And we look forward to the program today. And with that, I'm going to introduce Miles, and he's going to talk a little about what we're going to go over today.
Hey everybody, good afternoon. My name is Miles Dixon with the J. Barrett Company, and I'm really excited to see so many people here. I see some familiar faces, I see some new faces. That's really exciting to me because for the last 7 years, I've been working in and around federal grants here in Nevada, and really specifically working to find opportunities to increase the amount of federal grants you as organizations and we as a community receive. Because as you probably know better than most, we are underfunded effectively when it comes to federal grants, right? So we trail the nation often in federal grant funding, but we lead the nation and need an opportunity for federal grant funding. So those two things have coexisted for a long time, but they don't really make sense, especially for where we're trying to go as a state. So it's really great to see so many people here in the room to have a conversation about federal grants. And as Ray mentioned, this conversation really builds on years of work, and especially in the last year, the RTC with Southern Nevada Strong pulled together grant writers and experts from across this community and across the state with the state's grants office and others saying, so what are the big opportunities and barriers for us as a state? And one of the things that consistently comes up from grant writers especially is determining when to go or no go on a grant. So what we often hear from organizations is the state's processes aren't quite working the way we want them to, or local government or federal government. So the government processes that control federal grants aren't necessarily working the way we want them to. As you probably could guess, we don't have a lot of control about federal government, but we do have a lot of opportunity to shift the state government's behavior, or at least their approach to grants. And so I've had the privilege in the last 2 legislative sessions of lobbying on that issue on behalf of the Nevada Community Foundation and other business groups. So for the last 4 or 5 years, and really the last 8 years since the state's grants office, I want to quickly acknowledge Connie Lucido, the state's grants director. Thank you so much for coming down, Connie. We really appreciate everything you all in your office are doing. And so we've been making progress at the state. And so as that happened, more opportunities created for us as organizations. And like I said, the thing we hear most about, one of 2 things, state processes and or our own agency. And so what we're here to talk about today is our own agency. And really specifically, how do we make great, consistent decisions about to apply or not apply, to go or no go on a grant. So to do that today, what we're going to be doing is introducing a tool that was actually shared with us from some great folks, including Beth Rubens, who's going to be here to talk about the tool. And it's essentially a consistent process. It's a it's an objective measurement, a matrix that helps you as an organization evaluate in numerous ways, whether it's in budget or sustainability or alignment with programming, a really solid foundation to approach a grant and say, I want to go through this, I want to rank it, I want to score it, and I want to decide more consistently, does it make sense for us to go or no go? So that's the first half of today. And then the second half is what to do if you keep finding specific issues hold you back from that go decision. So if it's, hey, I'm not really sure we have a sustainability plan, or I'm not really sure we have a strategic plan and a programming mix that makes sense, or I'm not really sure that we have data that we can write a great grant with, or for that matter, manage our performance against. We're going to have a conversation with a panel of experts to talk about what does it look like as an organization to move closer to competitive and ready for grants, so that we have a process to consistently use to evaluate it, and then we also have at least some thoughts and maybe even a process about what to do as we think about raising these issues, whether it's with our CEO or with our finance department or our board of directors for that matter, or community partners. So that's the objective today. I'm going to stop talking. I'm going to introduce Beth Rubens from Vegas PBS, and really a stellar grant professional in our community. Beth happens to teach a course, as hopefully many of you know, over at the university, and Beth's been one of those folks that since we started this process has been a consistent champion both of the outcome, but also helping us think about how to get there. So thank you all so much for being here, and Beth, thanks so much.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. So just by way of a little background about why I'm up here talking about this tool specifically, I'm a social worker by training, but I've been in the nonprofit field for over 15 years now, 10 of which have been dedicated exclusively to grants. I worked in nonprofit organizations, I worked in higher ed, I worked in public K-12 education, I worked in sort of the gamut of organizations, and I've been a grant writer fundraiser for the majority of my career. I'm also the vice president of the Nevada Grant Professionals Association, and if you don't know what that is, please ask me, and I'd be happy to talk about that. I also teach in the UNLV Grant Academy. Again, if you don't know what that is, I'm happy to talk about that, and I do consulting work as well. So grants are sort of my life, and because I teach and I work in them day to day, I've discovered some things in my own practice that have become best practice in the organizations that I've worked in, and one of them is this matrix that we are going to be looking at today. We're going to do some activities later, but I want to introduce the concept and talk about how this functions in a lot of organizations. And for those of you that are grant writers, show of hands. Okay, so good, at least 30% of the room, if not 50. know how this operates in your different organizations, and so this will probably be familiar to some of you. Really, the idea behind this matrix is to take a specific grant opportunity and assess it step by step. Thank you. Assess it step by step to understand whether or not it's a good opportunity for your organization. And the things that you need to be thinking about, and again, this should not be a solo activity. This should be done in concert with your organization, amongst your administrative and executive staff, amongst your fiscal staff, and amongst your programmatic staff, as well as your fundraising and your grant writing staff. This is not something that should be done in isolation. I never sit in my office and fill this out and then say, okay, here's what we're doing, this is where we're moving. This is a conversation. But you need to think about whether or not the grant opportunity that you're considering would be dedicated to an established project or program with specific criteria, multiple years of implementation, success metrics, those types of things. Whether it would be applicable to a pilot program that you have started and maybe you want to expand or scale, whether it's something that you want to pilot, or whether it's a brand new idea. The reason you need to think about that, and it needs to be a discussion in your organization, is it's got to have mission relevance to your organization. You really need to be focused on not chasing the dollars, but seeing whether a particular grant opportunity is the right fit for your organization and your programs and services. So think about the things like cost and impact ROI, so the overall funding that's available versus the number of individuals, families, communities, constituencies, environments, whatever it is that will be served. Think about your internal priority levels. So if you've got multiple programs in your organization, on an annual basis, at minimum, you need to be thinking about which are the programs that are at highest need for funding and what is their picture, what is their mix. You need to think about whether or not you have existing partnerships and collaborations that can strengthen your grant application, because those of you that are grant writers in the room know that that is a very hot topic in the funding world these days, and that becomes of critical importance when you're submitting your application. Really important to think about your organizational capacity, whether or not you can take on a project of this size and scope, whether or not you have the demonstrable experience in managing federal funds. If you don't, it doesn't mean that you won't necessarily get approved, but it does lower you in terms of competitiveness. So think about your organizational capacity, your experience, and your history to implement these programs. What are your existing levels of staffing, resources, restricted and unrestricted funding streams, and the picture of those? What's the pie graph of your funding sources? You've got to be thinking about all of these things as you're having this conversation about new potential programs. And then also, it is a bit of a game to project into the future and think about future funding streams. There are trends in the corporate philanthropy world and the private philanthropy world, especially in the federal funding world. There are priorities that are indicated by different administrations that give you a sense of where federal funding might be headed and how things might change. Federal funding is certainly not something that is static or ever unchanging, so it's important to stay on top of what might happen and what shifts might change where your organization lies. So proposals need to reflect planning, research, and vision. Think about the ways that your organization can position itself for the long term, particularly in federal grant competitions. We know that we don't draw down enough federal funding, and a lot of that, in my personal view, not speaking for Southern Nevada Strong, but in my personal view as an expert grant writer, one of the things that we don't do well in this community is plan ahead and be proactive. We try to put together a grant application when we've got the 6-week application window opens and have it done by the end. That is harming us. That's one of the reasons, one of the contributing factors to why we are not drawing down enough federal funding, because we are not building partnerships prior to a grant announcement being made. And so one of the things behind Southern Nevada Strong is to get us all talking to each other, get us all in the room, get us all on the same page, so that we can start to build collaboratives that in 12 months from now or 18 months from now, when an opportunity comes available, we'll be ready for it, because our collaboration is already built, and all we have to do is write the application that meets the guidelines. That's what other places are doing that are, frankly, far more successful than us in drawing down federal funds. So my tips are: don't chase the money, build strong collaborative partnerships, and know where you are. Know what your capacity is internally, what you can and can't take on, and that will put you in a far better position. The decision-making matrix that everybody should have a copy of is a tool that I did not create, but I love. This is something that I find really, really helpful when I start working with a new organization because it's an objective way to assess and, like Miles said, get everyone on the same page as far as can we or can we not utilize this tool. And after the workshop, you'll hear a little bit more about how you'll get this tool in a non-PDF usable form, so stay tuned. But really, it's a process for going through these 11 criteria factors and weighting them on a scale of 0 to 10 about where your organization is at. So what I have found, this is a helpful tool to use in discussion in a face-to-face meeting with my colleagues from, again, program areas, from operations, from fiscal areas in my organizations, to talk about, okay, this is where I think we are, where do you think you are, how do you assess this particular criteria, and if you can come to a consensus, it is far easier to make a decision that's go, no, go, rather than just saying, oh, we can't do it, I'm the one person that's read through the entire application, RFP, and I just don't think it's in the cards for us. I don't think we can do it. That's not a productive conversation for most of us to have in our organizations. We need to have reasoning behind it, but it also helps give us an action plan for what to do within our organizations to help it move forward for other future grant applications. So we're going to have some discussion on this tool. Right, Ray?
Yeah.
All right.
Okay. So about a third of you, right, raised your hands when you said you're a grant writer. We're not expecting most of this to be the first time you have seen a tool or a checklist to get ready to, decide the grant opportunity is ready for you. We know that you guys are experts in your own organization. So before we just send you off with a piece of paper that you may or may not have had a time to go through, the first activity we're going to do is actually we're going to spend a little bit of time in your table groups or with a partner in your table groups, going over the entire thing, make sure you read it through, and determine if it's applicable, if any of the things need to change, if your organization actually has a different checklist, or some other component or criteria that this one may not. This is just a generic, 10 bullet points of things to consider. We know that not all of your organizations this may not be a perfect fit for. So we want to spend, and I've got a little bit of a timer here so that we have an activity where you actually break down, talk with someone through all of the criteria on this matrix and determine what part is applicable to your organization. And our follow-up question, if you were to actually use a formula in order to determine a good or a fit for a funding opportunity, would you weight any of it? Would you change any of it? Is there anything that you would do to adapt this to your current situation? So it's really important that you leave here with something that you think is usable and something that you think is unique and tailored to your organization. So that's what we're going to do for the next 8 minutes, is talk this through with someone, maybe someone who you don't know, definitely someone who you don't work with, and we'll come back and actually share. And also, when we reconvene and share, if anyone has any additional insights, we're also continuing to collect other resources, checklists, or other things that might look like this, and then we'll email those out when we email out this tool at the end too. So your time begins now. Otherwise, they...
right, guys, we're going to wrap it up. Everyone finished talking to their groups. Everyone, see, I've never been a teacher. I'm fine. Anyone have anything particularly insightful to share? Anyone have a discussion, something to add to a matrix when you're making a decision like this? Any other criteria or component that should be evaluated when you're looking at fit? Yeah.
We didn't really see or recognize reporting requirements.
Reporting requirements. Yeah, so like the capacity, right? Do you have the right team in place? Do you have staff to manage it and make sure that there's enough work time to then report back? Some grants are pretty heavy in reporting, right? Definitely something to consider. Angel, I'm going to pick on you. I think you had a really good one too. I heard Angel talking over here. They want to make sure that funding opportunities align with their brand, right? And so that, you know, I'm sure as a program gets developed or, you know, as a funder has certain requirements around recognition and other things, you want to make sure that that aligns too with the brand of your organization or its partners. Yeah.
The other thing I would just share too is that our organization does do a matrix similar to this, and what we struggled with was we actually applied more weight to some of the categories listed on the left-hand side and then proceeded with the scoring. And then as we did this on projects, we said, okay, what does the final score tell us? We didn't know where to draw the line on saying go, no go. And so what we decided is that we still don't really feel like we've got a solid number on when to go, no go, but what it allowed us to do was approach every opportunity with eyes wide open. We knew the cost-benefit analysis of moving forward or not moving forward with something. So if we still struggle with the final rating, but at least it's a good rubric to help us fully investigate every opportunity.
Awesome. Thanks. Yeah. Anyone else have any thoughts about it? Yeah.
Data entry requirements.
Data entry.
On the services, you've got to do HMIS.
Yeah.
Other industries, that brings to-
So is that a decision around staff time then eventually?
A lot of admin time. Yeah,
Right.
that they're not in the field doing what they should be.
Yeah. Yeah, and so sometimes when you have a decision around it's going to take a lot of person's time or whatever, sometimes you're going to have to, you know, rejuggle those responsibilities down into other staff. So you kind of have to think about an opportunity, maybe shifting responsibilities. And then other times you might have to think about an opportunity funding additional staff time, right? So, you know, is it going to be able to then make up for where you had staff before? Yeah, back there.
What struck me is, even though number 6 is partnership,
Yeah.
I mean, in the context of the 11 things, the whole idea of community capacity building and collaboration is really minimized. This seems to be almost in the focus of one organization
True.
versus a whole ecosystem.
Yeah.
That would be my primary criticism, and that's why we're here.
Sure. Yeah, I think a tool like this is really from maybe the actual fiscal agent or the grant applicant itself. Definitely worried more about the capacity of the organizational infrastructure to manage a complex funding formula and program and everything that comes into that. But it's true, I mean, some funding opportunities will be more heavily relied on the partnership and the capacity of every different partner, you know, that makes up a coalition or a collaboration. Yeah.
So included in number 9, a cap on domestic funds, it's a reimbursed grant.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to have a cash outlay ahead of time.
Absolutely.
So we would rather just have a big fat check.
Well, who wouldn't? Everyone would want a big fat check up front, but not usually does that work. So yeah, absolutely making sure your cash flow can really accommodate for the funding opportunity at hand. And we know federal grants sometimes take a little bit longer, especially if they have to flow through the state itself. And those are huge considerations, whether or not you have the capacity to outlay a lot of expenditures before getting reimbursed. Before we move on and talk a little bit more about further application of this tool, does anyone have other checklists that they've ever come across that fill this space or kind of, you know, are helpful or something that you remembered while going through this exercise? We are compiling additional resources to share with the group if anyone had any thoughts around, oh, this might be similar to, or someone should check out another website or anything like that. If you think of any throughout this, this afternoon, just let us know, because we'd love to share those with the group. So one thing that we came up with time and time again, also talking to the grant writers in our working group, as well as every time we've convened people like this, is really the strategy behind the go or go no, the strategy behind a grant opportunity and its fit within your organization. So one thing we wanted to have you guys discuss when it comes to a tool like this, rather than, we've talked about it fitting a specific grant opportunity, or if it comes across your desk and now you have an objective tool to look at, but what does it mean to use this tool over time? And what could it mean to really apply this into your organization and figure out how to use it as a way to empower you as the grant writer to talk to other people in your organization? So what I want you to do is look through this rubric and all 10 or 11 of these criteria, and just jot down exactly who in your organization you think is fundamentally responsible for making the decisions of each one of those categories. And then answer to yourself, are you meeting with them regularly? Are these people that you know? Are these people that have team meetings? Are these people that have weekly or monthly or maybe annual strategy sessions? How can you use all of the information here within whether or not an opportunity is a good fit for your organization? How can you use this as a tool to infiltrate your organization? Now, some of you, I know there's only really 3 people who make decisions like that in your organization, but it's really important to have discussions about fit and about growth in a very strategic way. So why don't you talk to your small group around whether or not you meet frequently with someone who makes these decisions, or maybe you've never had a conversation with someone who decides that, the grant management component is easy or not easy. And just kind of think through how a tool like this can be applied moreover into a broader sense inside your organization. Wait, I've got more. No. Yes.
Using something like this.
Hello. Hey, guys. I hope you can wrap up your discussion and we'll focus back up here to reconvene as one large group. I'll just keep talking to myself. It's not a problem. Enjoy. Okay. Awesome. Thanks. This is very exciting because it seems like all of you guys are really breaking down a lot of how we could maybe move forward with some good tips from today. Anyone have anything maybe surprising as they went through, thinking about strategy and thinking about future applications of some of this? Anyone have a reflection to share? You don't have to. No. Okay. Yeah.
Ray, I kind of have a question.
Yeah.
In thinking about my organization and what we have done historically in securing grant funding, typically it was based on a need, after we've done a need assessment before the S.Nevada Strong Comprehensive Plan. We
Yeah.
conducted needs assessments in the community.
Yeah.
And based on the PI's passion or interest, they went after grants that addressed their interests. And the grants were typically for the purpose of addressing the community need,
Yeah.
as well as establishing a staff to implement a program and deliver it in the community. My question is, how does an organization that has basically worked in a silo in terms of grant funding, how do you then extend your reach and work with partners? Where if there's a check, the organization doesn't just get that check, because that's how it's been done. With all due respect to my organization, we get the check, we keep the funds, and thank you for being a partner with us. But
Yeah.
how do you get out of that? How do you change that mind shift or thinking?
Super great question. Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to take a stab at it from my experience, but does anyone have any initial thoughts? You guys are all experts in this. We got hands up. Let's go. Yeah.
One of the strategies that we use at our agency is we look around the community and see what services would benefit the individuals that we work with. And when we identify those partners in the community, what we do first is we screen them just to assure that they'll maintain the same philosophy. And then we're very adamant about the quality of service. So we do a thorough screen. We've even done background checks on the people that work there if they allow us. But then what we do is we form a memo of understanding that we're going to exchange referrals. And those first referrals are so critical because what we do is we'll send one of our consumers on a referral, and then we say, call us back as soon as you're done. Let us know. It's just like marketing in the for-profit sector. we're doing follow-up and studies, and then from those memos of understanding, when there's funding opportunities that we can partner up with, we already know them. We know the quality of work that they can do. And of course, they have to want to partner with you as well. So we are glad when they want to scrutinize us. So we have taken to do the memo of understanding because that it formalizes the partnership that we have. It means we want to work together, but also it's that 12-month partnership down the road when you see a grant and then there's somebody that you need to partner with. They already know you.
Is there a sharing of funds?
Usually, if you
Usually
write,
it's the organization.
exactly. There can be. I wrote a grant a few years ago. It was a federal grant, and they needed a statewide partnership. And in that particular case, I invited somebody to be our partner so we can statewide. But you don't necessarily have to share the money. And I'll give you an example. One of the functions that our organizations that are in the spot individuals with disabilities apply for their benefits. So if they're applying for Social Security, there are law groups out there that can help an individual. They'll charge them like 30% of their rental pay. But what we do is we've been looking right now, and we found out a lot, not that there's any bad law, okay? It's just, we needed a law group that understood that our conditions that we do alone, in the growing time of season, they not only need funding, but housing, food, clothing, everything. So once we identify that partner, now we can provide them in any grant we go there to support partner, and we can say that we have a long-term established referral, memo of understanding and partnering. So there is no money. But are they getting the money? Of course they're getting it. If you send them a referral, like, they get the 30% of the rest. They like to work with us because we train them and we can essentially do service disability. So your partnership, if you're looking we've always held a philosophy that the best partnership we can have is a company that truly believes in helping individuals and what they do, that has compassion, has a care, but also has the quality and also has the will and the determination to maintain strong compliance.
Awesome. Perfect. And I saw a few more hands go up for that question around partnerships. Yeah.
So, I mean, and so our main thing that we work on is employment. So because our main thing is employment, we don't do some of the emergency services that individuals need. So we make an effort to reach out to the other agencies that provide the other services. So there's no exchange of money, but what there is there's an exchange of services. So if an individual goes and they have emergency services that some of these other agencies, but then they get employed, and then they need some transportation or something like that, then they can refer them back to us, and then we can take care of that. So it's, I don't know that it's a, of course, we have the opportunity to co-write a grant or be a recipient of a grant. But there's also opportunity where when that's not necessarily happening, that we can still refer our job seekers and assistants to the different agencies that have what you don't have. So then that person is still taking care of it. That makes sense.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. And I think both of those are exactly how I would approach the situation too, is defining a partner, defining what your need is, what service you cannot provide, or what you think would be, what is a program that you're searching for, but not, if you can't offer all of the different component parts. And then finding that person and building that relationship well in advance of a funding opportunity. I think that is very critical. Having it written down in a partnership agreement or an MOU is really is really helpful sometimes to establish expectations, but you would absolutely have something like that if you had a money exchange. And a collaboration that really does apply for one big pool of money and then distribute it among partners, you really want to make sure that that relationship is very, very well established, very solid, and that it's a significant amount of trust between all of the partners, because then you're sharing money, you're going to share fiscal responsibility, you're also sharing then the outcomes of the funding itself, even though maybe one partner might be kind of identified as the lead agency. Do you want to add anything, or are we good? Yeah.
That also helps us when you get that money in the board season. They don't all of a sudden start saying, oh, we know we have these things.
Yeah.
You say, oh, yes, this is really wonderful, and here's all the ways we've already identified. So the grant is already stipulated the grant, that this is the use. That way you don't lose control of that. Sometimes it happens.
Absolutely.
You give the money, everybody sees dollars.
Yeah, for sure. And then also for smaller organizations, making sure that you understand how to quantify your value to a big partnership, right? So it might be in dollars per hour of staff time, it might be in some of the resources or some of the other staffing components that you're bringing to a partnership. But I think it's fair, even as a small partner, if you're applying to be one component of a very large grant and a big partnership, to ask for money too, and to say, we're going to support this program because this is what we do, but if we're applying for money, this is kind of what we need to cover our costs. And being strategic about that and actually having a value assigned to the work that you're putting into a partnership. But I would absolutely recommend very clear expectations from the very beginning, written into a funding proposal around where all the money is going to go, and then also what your relationship is to the primary applicant, to make sure that they understand what you're going to use that money for, and you make sure to communicate back as often as possible. That's a great question. Any other insights, any other thoughts around more of the strategic long-term approach when it comes to opportunity or fit from funding? I think Beth mentioned this when she kind of did a good overview in the beginning, but what we hope is that over time, and a static matrix may not be the way that you end up working and evaluating funding opportunities fit over a long period of time, but it might be an interesting Kickstarter for the next few to determine, if you have been really taking a comprehensive view over an opportunity and whether or not it applies for your exact current space today on the ground. But actually going back and looking, maybe challenge yourself to do it, 4 times or 6 times over the next coming months as you see grant opportunities and funding announcements, and then go back and look at those matrix and look at over time, what did you end up applying for, what did you not, and where were the differences in your evaluation, or also for the ones that you decided not to go forward with. Really take some time and evaluate what happened. Where was the breakdown? Did you just not have time for that deadline, or was it more strategic within your organization? And because I think it's very common occurrence to see an opportunity to make a decision on feelings, sometimes more than facts, and then moving forward and forgetting to really spend the time to reflect. I think reflection as also planning are both things that we tend to not do when it comes to serving clients and keeping up all of the balls in the air over time, right? We know the work that you guys do is very exciting and rewarding and valuable, but sometimes it's also very hectic. And so those are 2 things that we tend to forget to do is go back and think, why didn't this work, or why didn't we move forward? Yeah, Jose, you got another?
With the point you just made, I think something that we get caught up in is organization. And I'm at UNLV, and I know a lot of times some people will come to us and they'll like, oh, you guys are too big, we're not sure we want to work you guys, we try to take over everything. We don't. But I think something that is that in this kind of work, we have to invest in those relationships.
Yeah.
I'm probably bringing everybody together here today so that we kind of have an idea of what's going on. But you constantly have to invest in those relationships so that once you, let's say you do have your organizational capacity down and you know what you're capable of doing and the type of funding you're going to, also by investing in those relationships, then we know who should be at the table or who's doing like similar work. I experienced this in Detroit, where there was an organization, they were great at writing grants, but they couldn't deliver all the programming elements. So we came in and did a social network study of their environment in Southwest Detroit and East Side and those areas. And when we came back, we said, well, hey, you know, you guys are really great at writing grants, and you've been successful over the years of getting these grants. And years later, when I went back and just visited, went to one of their coalition meetings, and they had landed multi-million dollars of grants, and this organization, they were the funding source, but then they had established all this network of all these, you know, these people were this organization really good at youth services, this organization was really good at senior citizen services.
Yeah.
They had it all, they had it down, and they were being very successful in Detroit and bringing all these dollars into Detroit. All these things, but it's an investment in time and investment in those partnerships.
Absolutely.
To make sure that we're staying in communication with each other. You know, I think that's part of what Southern Nevada Strong is trying to do, is bring those folks, you know,
Absolutely.
on a basis together.
Yeah. Clay, you wanted to add something?
No, I was just going to add to that, that part of this dialogue is, and what we were talking about here is we think we know
Yeah.
what other organizations are doing, but the more opportunity we have for dialogue to go, oh, wait, you're doing that specific level, your program's doing this, well, my
Yeah.
program's doing this, and suddenly you find a natural fit. When we have those opportunities to
Yeah.
really discuss beyond just, the mission statement
Absolutely.
or what we think we know the other org is doing.
Well, and then I can actually, I can appreciate that you guys take the time out of your hectic workday to come to a meeting like this, where you're going to sit next to someone that you may not see very often. And if I can encourage any sort of next step, it's making the time to actually go to some of the coalition meetings, go to some of the partnership meetings, go and attend advisory boards or other places where within an issue area it might be kind of tangential or related to the services that you offer. And that's the only way you're going to know whether or not you're going to fit with a partner or be able to see that. So definitely encourage you guys to get more out there if you can. And continue to participate in convenings like this and others. And then I'll also make a little plug to Jose's point. Everyone that comes into any of the events for Southern Nevada Strong, whether it's related to grants or our work with transit and development or our work with community engagement and data mapping, we have a database of everybody that we've talked to. And we've been tagging everybody and categorizing everyone based on how what their issue area is, and also where they work and who they work with. And we are trying to actually build that social network in order to actually figure out how all of our community relates to each other. So if you're ever looking for a new partner, or if you're ever looking for an organization working in this space or that space, give us a call, and maybe we can help put you in touch with somebody that's been to one of our sessions, that's come to one of our events, or someone that we should go meet together because we don't know them either. And we'd love to be a part of that with you. So thank you so much. Great discussion. Again, if you have any ideas or resources that are pertinent to this conversation, please let us know. I'll be in the back here as we move on to our next segment. And we are going to email this tool out in an Excel spreadsheet so you can change it, make it yours, and any other resources that someone shares with me, I'll send them out at the same time. And you're up.
Nice. So we are going to move on next to a panel, and I want to say before we get started, any of you who know me know I could have stood up here for 90 minutes and talked the whole time. We tried to build this event, and we're trying to build events that create opportunity for all of you to talk to each other as opposed to just hear from us, but also hear from some experts that we think can really add great experience and hard-earned lessons to the conversations we're having. And so in that spirit, we invited panelists, and I'll introduce them, and maybe if you all could join me up here. There are chairs and even a microphone. And Sean Parker is first up, Executive Director of Teach for America, Las Vegas Valley. Sean. And Dr. Lisa Morris-Hibler from the City of Las Vegas, who is the Director of Youth Development and Social Innovation for the City of Las Vegas. And Daniil Milam with the Clark County Las Vegas Library District and Foundation, who is the Director of Planning and Development there. Thanks so much for being here, Danielle. And so a wonderful panel, and our hope is actually to have a conversation between you all and them and not me. But I'm going to cue us up, and I'll say it this way, is that the issues on that grant matrix, while we're doing our best to reduce them to a score, we're doing our best to reduce them to 11 categories. The reality is those are really big issues, right? Do we have a strategic plan? Or some of the conversations you all and issues you've mentioned, do we have a fiscal management process that can really segment sources and uses of funds and plan that out over 24 or 36 months? Those are big issues, and they're not issues one department or one person solves. They're issues that multiple people, multiple departments at multiple levels solve together. And so what we wanted to do was invite some experts who are really personified within their organizations, which include local government, quasi-public agency, and a nonprofit. Having gone through the process of really crafting programs, services, and organizations that meet the needs and opportunities of our community and are able to dynamically address them, that's why we wanted to have a great panel. So thank you all so much for being here. And to kick off, I'm hoping each of you can begin by sharing maybe just 2 minutes about the journey over the last, I think for especially all of you, the last 3 to 5 years of evolution in your organizations, because I think in many ways they look different than they did 3 or certainly 5 years ago. So maybe, Sean, we could start with you.
Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm Sean Parker, and I've been in this role for 2 years, but with Teach for America for 9 years and in the Las Vegas Valley for the last 5. And what I've noticed sitting in this role, I came to this role from a program officer perspective. I ran the program that we were doing before I took over the executive director seat. And what we had to ask ourselves is the work that we're doing leading to transformation in our sector? Because we only exist in order to improve education in our communities, and if it's not working, then we don't deserve to exist. We shouldn't exist in that way. And we realized we were making a good impact, but we weren't making the necessary impact that our partners were all asking from us. And one example of that is a partner who's sitting right next to me, being asked to serve on the Innovations in Education Committee at the City of Las Vegas helped us realize that there were a lot of needs that we could address that we were not yet addressing. And one of the things that we learned by sitting in this committee was that Las Vegas experiences one of the largest summer learning slides in the country for our kids. And what that means is that when they end school in May and start back up in September at the time, that they were experiencing 4 to 5 months of learning loss and were actually falling farther behind than even if they were in school for that time. And Teach for America across the country has done our summer training in these 5 cities as hubs. So we sent all of our people to Phoenix over the past few years to get trained there over the summer, and then they come back to Las Vegas and teach in schools. And we thought, why not merge our program with a need in the community? And so we were able to, alongside a partner, and this goes back to a partnership question, we had been partnering long before this was an opportunity. And I don't think it would have been an opportunity if we hadn't already been partnering. And then there was another funding opportunity and a federal funding opportunity. It all just merged together. We were able to say, let's go after this and let's figure out how to bring summer learning opportunities for kids to the Las Vegas Valley. And that's something that has been a tremendous opportunity for us, also tremendous headache. It has been really difficult. We've had to hire 36 part-time staff, 2 full-time staff, in a matter of 4 months, which is not, as you all know, that's not an easy task. But that was way over 2 minutes. So that's one example, and I can share more.
Thanks, Sean.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Lisa Morris-Hibbler. I'm the Director of Youth Development and Social Innovation for the City of Las Vegas. And our organization looks quite a bit different. Our department has only been in existence for 2.5 years. But the work that we've been doing in terms of our youth and educational support dates all the way back beyond 2011. I think for us, we, as a city, in a community where we do not oversee education for a long time, our position was that we would just say, well, that's the school district, and everybody just was okay with that. I think there was an understanding, first at the national level, that all cities had a responsibility to their families and their citizens, and that we actually did have a responsibility to at least be at the table to say, well, it's not okay that some of our students don't have access to high-quality schools. And so that's kind of where we started within that voice. So we started kind of as an influencer in those conversations. And then we moved into real work. It started in our collective impact. We had a homegrown collective impact project called Downtown Achieves, and then My Brother's Keeper, and now we have Reinvent Schools Las Vegas. But the biggest thing is that the city has really made education its priority in a sense of what in our own sphere of influence. And we had to get comfortable for that because we would always get a lot of negative articles, including when my department was created. But at the end of the day, we have to be a community that really values education. We have to be a community that really wants all of our children to thrive, and we want to have a solid workforce, and all of that will not happen if everybody's not on the same page about why education is important. So I think to Miles's point, sometimes you have to be willing to stand alone, even when it hurts, even when it's scary, if you want to have that change. And so I am thankful to our mayor and city council. They were willing to do that, and they were also willing to take a chance on me to lead up that work, because it was tough work, but it's very rewarding work. So thank you.
Thanks, Lisa. I love that story of standing alone, and I think the story of the library district and the Library Foundation is about standing together and working together better. One of the first grants I wrote 10 years ago when I arrived in town just in time for the recession was something that, folks and I and other organizations and I got together, and we just thought we had written the most collaborative grant ever. Sent it off to our federal agency, the Institute for Museum and Library Services, and found out that our colleagues across the country had been doing that work 10, 15, 20 years ago. So it was challenging to come to Vegas, and in my first budget meeting at the library district, we had moved from an $84 million organization to a $48 million organization in 1 year. And, they had been used to getting 22% revenue increases for decades. And we had a very savvy CFO who was stashing cash so that we could build buildings and grow with the growth that was happening in the valley. But we really needed to bump up our collaboration game. So I think the big difference is that we are extremely collaborative now. We are very innovative in our collaborations. We were able to jump on the new market tax credit bandwagon, which is an extremely complex game, but we've also been very, very successful in just holding meetings together with, as Jose was saying, the ecosystem of the various issues that we touch. And of course, the library district has the ability to touch workforce, small business, early education, school support, seniors, career development, and what we're doing is we're doing that all in collaboration with a lot of different partners, and many of whom I see in this room. So thanks for that question, Mal.
Well, thank you all. I'm going to ask one more question, and then I'd love to have other folks jump in here. I'm curious, as you've heard the conversation today, you've seen a matrix. Hopefully, you, of course, are all familiar with these 11 concepts. But as you sit in positions that are responsible for essentially creating a new arc for your organizations, addressing emerging needs and opportunities with sometimes limited resources or brand new resources like tax credits. When you look at these issues and you think about the team you have to have in place and the role of those team members, given that I think about a third of the room may have been grant writers, so 2/3 are something else, how does a team work together to try to address these issues? Like, do we have a long-range strategic plan? And does our strategic plan include programming that matters to funders and matters to our community?
You want me to start? Okay, that's complex, but it has to be done. So I'm in a governmental agency, so it's a little bit different, but first of all, partnerships. I think to Sean's point, a lot of the work we're able to do because we already have the partners. And we've already been doing some things, maybe on a smaller scale, that allows us to quickly be responsive. The other thing is really having some sort of a strategic plan or a business plan that's, very, very specific about what it is that you're trying to do. That's important because if not, every grant looks like it's for you. And every grant is not for you. And so as you saw with that matrix, one of the things about the grants is you really want to make that informed decision about whether to move forward or not. Oftentimes grants, for everything that you're going to get that supports your mission, you're going to pick up something that doesn't. And you need to know, does that thing that you're picking up, does it somehow support your mission, maybe indirectly, so that you don't find yourself too far askew? And the one way that you can keep from doing that is to make sure that you have that strategic plan.
Well, for any successful project, about 95% of the work is upfront planning, and it's upfront thinking, and as Ray was saying earlier, it's reflecting, understanding your ecosystem, as Jose was saying. There's just so much work that needs to be done before you even think about starting that grant. And as I arrived during the recession, and the foundations were falling left and right, one of the things that I did was really start to work on data. Because I found that this was a community that was also a desert for data. And that once we got that data, once we started to understand who we serve, Lisa and I were just talking, I mean, nobody knows that Vegas is a city of hardworking families. We have no, relative terms to all other metro areas, we have no institutionalized poverty. We do have pockets. I mean, I'm not saying it doesn't exist, but in terms of where we can go as a community, we have a lot of assets that we need to really articulate and tell a different story about. And so, I think it's data finding, it's data analysis, it's working with your partners, it's having conversations. We've had a conversation with our coalition of about 15 organizations around early childhood called Raising Las Vegas for over 18 months. All of a sudden, when we get our intent clear, when we get our story clear, it seems like the resources are just coming in one after the other. And I think that within a year or so, we'll be positioned as a community to ask for not only the big federal dollars, but also match that up with business community dollars and philanthropic dollars from the really big guys. Because, as Miles said, we're a donut hole for federal dollars, and this gives us, right there, another asset that we have as a community.
So I was really excited to learn how many people in this room work in grants. How many people in this room would say that you work on the program side of the work? There's a good number of people in here. And how many people in this room would say you might not be a grant writer, but you work on the money side in some other way? A lot of people in here, more people in there. And I'd say that I thought I couldn't do this job. Let me be very clear. I was like, I'm not going to apply for this job. I don't think I can do it, because I viewed the executive director job as somebody who would have to go out there and ask for money and find money. And being a program guy, I was like, that's not where my heart is. How many people in here hate asking for money? Yeah, it's a lot of people. I still do. I don't like asking for money, but now I love my job a lot more because I feel like I can invest people in where we are going. And I can speak from the heart and say this is what it looks like to actually run our program, because I have sat in that seat and I've been able to do that for many years. And now I'm asking people just to believe in what we're doing. And what I realized along the way as I took over this job is that the people on our team who are asking for money and the people on our team who are doing the program, we're not always collaborating. How many people in this room have felt that, some sort of dissonance between those two teams? Yeah, it happens. And what I found is that the program people, they are righteous in the best possible ways and also don't always want to acknowledge that we have to get money to do what we do. They will keep working without worrying about where the money's coming from to a fault, and if we only had program people, we would collapse tomorrow because we wouldn't have the funding to do what we're doing. And the development people are like tenacious to a fault in going after money, sometimes when it doesn't hit all of the 11 things on our matrix. We didn't really use a matrix, but similar types of work, right? They're like, let's go after this money, let's go after this money. And I remember my first month on the job here in my program role, we had gotten this really large grant, and Beth, we was actually in collaboration with communities and schools where Beth was at the time. And I was told that I had to go get like 2 years of data in 1 week. And I had a heart attack. I was like, that's impossible. I can't do it, y'all. You set me up for failure. And I realized that our development team had promised something that we didn't necessarily have at the time. And I had to go and find all of that data. And I knew at the time that we had to, because it was a foundational gift to us that allowed us to operate. But what I use that as an example to say that we've really evolved over the last few years to ensure that the people on both wings of our work are talking and communicating with each other. We created what we call a 2025 strategic plan for us, our vision for 2025. And at first, it was just the program people saying it, like, what are we going to accomplish by 2025? we soon realized that people on our development team who work with community partners also have a really critical point of view, but also really critical contacts that we needed to help us do that. And so they went out into the community and talked with our funders, but also key advocates, key partners, people from the city, people from all over, and asked, like, what do you believe needs to be true about education and the role that Teach for America can play? And so in that way, our development team and our program team co-developed the vision for 2025, so everybody's on the hook. And then we created what we call an innovator committee, where if we are going to go after new funding, it has to make sure that it is innovative within the scope of work we already do. People use like innovative in a way like go do something new. We want to do new within our existing streams of work because that's the only way that we're going to be sustainable. And that pairs up our development team and our program team, and then they have to spend a day in the field together once a month where they are crossing lines, where our grant writer is going to visit classrooms with our coaches, and our coaches are going to spend time in community meetings to see how difficult it is to raise the funds to be able to do this work, so they don't forget that we also have to report back and have that data to report back. So I think in some ways that wouldn't be possible if everybody weren't on the same page, and that's why I really got excited about joining the Southern Nevada Strong community, is because we have our 2025 vision, but we also have a community-wide direction that we're rowing in, and it's unlocking more doors for us at the federal level and at the just national grant level. There's a lot of people who we talk to who fund our other regions at Teach for America who wouldn't fund Las Vegas in the past because they saw this as a community that didn't work together, or it didn't have a vision for what the future was going to look like. And they're more ready to do that now because they see a lot of people working together. And I got accused at the school board meeting a few weeks ago. They're like, we can't fund you because the Walton Family Foundation already gives you plenty of money. And I was like, oh my God, it would be so great if the Walton Family Foundation gave me any money. But they don't give me any money. All of our money is locally raised and sourced. And they had given our national team some money. So it's just like, I was like, they won't give us the money because they don't see us working together yet. And the hope is that we can unlock a lot more funding sources.
Nice, thank you all. So I want to open it up and invite any questions, any observations for the panel. Sure.
Yes, I just wanted to give a shout out to the library district. When I walk down to the Clark County Library and see all the different programs that are going on in that institution alone, it's just mind-boggling. And I've had the opportunity to have a conversation with Ron Geeson and through my friend Michael Saunders that was the head of the Board of Trustees. And I just think it's a really progressive, really innovative organization. And I think in terms of the virtual sense of what the library does in non-traditional sense is really important. Because that's where I think where I'm different than a lot of people in this room. I'm dealing with hackers and people with make affairs. I can fully appreciate what you're doing with Best Buy, not down the street, but Best Buy at the corporate headquarters. And I understand that some of these collaborations, our avatars are more important than our physical sense. And the library district is a real good, I think this is one of the most innovative library districts anywhere in the world. And so I think it's a real jewel in terms of the community collaboration. And again, I want to emphasize the virtual sense of what they're doing in terms of their presence on the internet and non-traditional training courses and non-traditional collaborations. And I challenge people in this room to reach out to people in places like Dubai and the Philippines and Toronto and elsewhere. It's not impossible, it's very practical these days. And those best practices can come from anywhere. And I really think in my 20 years in this community, sometimes we're really parochial. Even though we're a cosmopolitan international hospitality sense, on the nonprofit sense, I think we've got pigeonholes into how we're thinking. So I'll let the library district respond to that.
Wow, thank you so much. And I do agree with you. I think we're extremely fortunate to have a richness of facilities in neighborhoods that matter. The industry is extremely disrupted right now, but to me, I feel like the library district here is really grabbing hold of those various opportunities that you were just talking about. Some of the virtual resources, for example, we have over 3,000 Gale courses. We have lynda.com. So if you've got a card, it's all free. If you want to train your people up, I want to talk to the back of house side of why we're successful as innovators and what we're learning from partnerships, because I can call up folks in the room and I can say, oh my God, that grant is due tomorrow, sorry Ray, and I need that letter right now and I can get it, thank you Lisa. But the fact of the matter is, we're learning a lot about the partnership. And one of the most innovative national models that we're premiering right now is bringing workforce one-stops into our libraries. One-stops around the nation, and the one here in town is open Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. And all of a sudden, in 1 year, they're able to mobilize out to over, I believe, 12 different library sites now, not only Las Vegas, Clark County, but also North Las Vegas, Henderson, and Boulder City, and get those one-stops, not only the workforce and employment side, but the DEETR side, the Department of Ed side, the TANF side. And I think that for the first time, I just got goosebumps, I think that we're really coming together in a way that the nation is going to look at Vegas as being extremely innovative. But what we're finding is the back house side of that takes just as much resources and just as much time and just as much cross-training and service integration attention as that public-facing side, and, you know, counting the measures that matter and making sure that we're delivering what we all want to deliver with probably over 10, 15 different partners all in play, all trying to make up the game, all trying to fly the plane as we build it. So it's thank you for your accolades and kudos, but also know that we're going to be looking around and learning from everybody on how to do this better.
Oh, Seth?
Right. So, speaking from an agency perspective, someone who might not have worked with the library, the city, or TFA just yet, how do you find new partners, wed new partners? What makes you think someone makes a good partner to you? And conversely, how do they find out if you are a good partner to them? What's the process in which they could learn about, like, 2025 TFA, or the city's innovation perspective, or the library's target in 5 or 10 years? How would you find a way to marry the two between that interest and yours?
I think of it sometimes as dating, honestly. We're like dating different organizations to see if we're the right fit. And some of that is organic, and some of it's like other people set you up on a blind date. Oftentimes I found like funders will be like, oh, you should really partner with this other organization. You would be great partners. And they set us up on a blind date, and we're like, no, we would not be great partners. We don't do anything aligned with each other. Yes, we both care about kids, but that doesn't mean that our work is necessarily aligned. And sometimes we won't realize where that partnership could blossom or take roots at all unless there's another opportunity down the line. And so one example of that is a nonprofit we got set up with was this amazing nonprofit, Green Our Planet, who I'm sure many of you are familiar with. They do great work in this community, but the partnership they wanted with us was to write curriculum for them because they heard that we were involved in education. We are in education, but we don't write curriculum. And so the funder wanted us to work together, and we're really pushing this. And eventually we just had to back out and say, this isn't the right opportunity for us to partner. We're still going to partner like on the side. So we still like send them our email blasts, and we still invite them to an opportunity fair we have. And yet we're not going to partner on this initiative together. And so that's what I found, like we have like a light touch point now, and I'm sure one day down the line there might be another opportunity for Greener Planet for us to have a more in-depth partnership, but right now is not that time. And so we're keeping like contact, but we're not necessarily dating still. And I find that to be true for a lot of organizations. And then I want to shout out other aggregators of people like the City of Las Vegas that has done a really stellar job of bringing people together who may have overlapping interests when it comes to education that I hadn't experienced before in a municipal sense until the City of Las Vegas asked us to come to that. And then we got to make partnerships with all sorts of people, from the FACES office at CCSD to TNTP to just like endless number of organizations that we still talk with.
So for us, we try to be, we wear different hats at different times. So we can be, hello, Seth, how are you doing? We can be funders, we can be conveners, facilitators, all those different. So in that respect, the Innovations in Education advisory committee that he's referring to, we brought people together. So when I said we were standing alone because the city was moving forward with this department, and we were just going to go all in on trying to, improve education. But we knew that we needed to have partners like the Library District and TFA and College of S.Nevada and CCSD and others at the table to say, what our role should be and where we should be investing our resources, which eventually got folded into the city by design work that Miles did. But I think you have to just make everything inviting. Most of the times, people hear about it because somebody went, and then they told somebody, and then they get invited. And I think that's when you know that you really got it, because that's the organic. I mean, you really want it, to me, you want it to be organic. And we have a lot of different ways that we invite people to the table. Sometimes it's around an area, like the Innovations in Education. We have the Latino Network, the My Brother's Keeper Task Force. We try to just make sure that people can plug in wherever they want to plug in, and sometimes it's just about the information. Other times they're making connections, and so sometimes we have to be that person that's kind of weaving all that together into this nice little quilt by making sure that people know what others are doing in the community, so that we can really expand the resources that we have.
I guess I would say the ecosystem, absolutely understand your place in it and what you bring to it. And with that, then you can move to your business plan. How are you distinctive? How are you delivering something that nobody else can? And don't be intimidated by the big guys on the block. Don't be intimidated, because you may be bringing to them some piece that we've been missing. And I think when we were starting up the Teen Tech Centers here, we went to the MCA of Long Beach, California, and found the kids who have been training kids, because we couldn't find trainers here in town that wouldn't intimidate our staff and wouldn't intimidate the kids. And turns out to be a very great model, and that organization had the history and could articulate the value that they could bring to our partnership. So, if you've got something special, be sure that you're out there meeting with the people in your ecosystem, making sure that strategic plan, when you're talking about it, people understand and see where you are in the bigger picture of the community need that you're trying to feed, and then understand how you can play in whatever sandbox you can get into.
Well, in the interest of making sure you all get out of here on time, we're going to wrap up, and I want to ask one final question, just for quick perspective from each of you. I tend to think of issues around federal grants, that's where I work a lot, but I also hear these conversations, and I know from my experience in fundraising or working with organizations in fundraising, these are often the same issues, whether it's a city council that's going to ask you, whether it's a funder, whether it's a board. And so I was curious, as you all have moved towards grant readiness, if you will, do you find it paying off in multiple areas, or do you find it just in federal grants?
No? Well, so the grant readiness, it pays off in all areas. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
Yeah, it really does.
That's what you said.
Yes, yes. The city has ebbed and flowed in how we perceive grants. I mean, there was a time when we wanted to apply for every grant. It seemed like we were just being told. I see my colleague back there like, yeah. And then they want to know, you wake up one day, you're like, how did I get over here? This has nothing to do with my book of business. And it's because we were chasing after every single grant. But I think once you refine, what it is that your mission is and what you're looking for, it makes it so much easier. And then it also helps you to kind of manage up, in the sense that you can then articulate to your board, your city council, your whoever, your bosses, why you might not want to apply for a certain grant. Because sometimes that's a hard conversation to have when somebody's so excited about giving you that. You're like, yeah, I don't think it's really for us. So I would say the more prepared you are, the easier it is to justify, which grants you're applying for. And let's face it, grants take a lot of time to write. I know for those people who don't write grants, they may not know, but writing is intense. And so you really want to spend your time on those grants that are really going to move your mission, and not waste time on things that take you askew. So
I would totally echo that. Getting into the federal grant writing business is something that will just pay off in all kinds of ways. I think about the way that I used our federal pass-through grants that came through the state. They were $100,000 a year in an organization with a large budget that I just mentioned. That might not seem like a lot, but we really leveraged those grants to be planning grants, to understand that we weren't ready to start and jump into any game yet, because we didn't know what the games were, we didn't know what our place was, we didn't know what capacity we had, we didn't know where our partners were, and so we really used those grants to position us. Then we started applying for some of the Institute for Museum and Library Services grant to show the rest of the world that we were great. that we could partner with the strongest libraries in the nation and hold our own and tell our story and reposition ourselves and our communities, Clark County, Las Vegas, in a different way nationally and tell our story so that we're looked at as a place of innovation. And I think that the key is to distinguish yourself and make sure that you're telling the story of the work that you're really doing. Because it is hard work. It's very hard work, and there are a lot of players and a lot of moving parts. But when you get it right, the momentum actually builds itself, and it makes the work really exciting.
And I'll add one thing to my previous answer, which is I think that the thing that helps us build partnerships is also our board. I think that's a really critical thing, leveraging the people on our board who already have other partnerships. But for this, I'll leave you, my last thought is, we just landed our first federal grant at the local level for $270,000. And I'm so thrilled by this, but it wouldn't have happened, not just if we weren't like grant ready, but if we weren't connected to a national network. I think that part of what I learned is that I do not have the expertise to know all of the grants that exist at the federal level. There are so many opportunities out there, and we just did not have the capacity or the expertise. Even if we had the capacity and I said, your job is grant writing, they didn't have the expertise to know what that looked like at the federal level. And so luckily at Teach for America, we have a built-in network, but I know a lot of you have associations or networks that extend beyond this with the capacity and knowledge of what's out there. And especially in the last few years with the federal government's budgeting, where things are like thrown in and then taken out and then thrown in and taken out, I just didn't even know what was out there and what was still out there and what was going to be approved. And so I feel everybody's pain in this room who has to do that dance and know that we couldn't have sat here with that $270,000 gift if we didn't have somebody who used to work in the White House administration doing that type of work that we were able to call and say, what is out there for us and what can we get? And then can you look at this and give us feedback on the grant that we're submitting? Because honestly, I really don't know. Even if I thought we were 10s on all 11 of those things and our score was 110, I don't think we would have still gotten the grant because this person knew how to word things in a way that would get us that grant. And so be grant ready and be building coalitions locally. I think that is important. And then at the national level, leverage the knowledge that exists out there.
Well, yeah.
Last word. I think that's such an important point that you just raised too. The federal grants game is not what it was. And if you're not out there diversifying your portfolio based on your success in federal grants or going after them, you will not survive.
Daniil, Lisa, Sean, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you guys again. Really appreciate your insights and sharing. We're actually done. We try to keep these to 90 minutes so that we can get you back to the important work that you do every day. I just wanted to say thank you again for coming and for actively participating. You really showed up, and that's kind of half the battle sometimes when we put events together. Of course, we could all use 10 more staff tomorrow, but it's hopefully some time like this, a little bit of an hour in a workday to kind of think about how to leverage what you know, how to work with what you have, and be better at delivering the product and the service that you do every day. And so we really appreciate you in making our community better. Again, if you had any thoughts around other resources to share, we are still going to send out an email to everybody with what we talked about today, as well as with a post-event survey, so don't forget to fill that out. We do have 2 upcoming workshops in this series. We're going to talk a little bit to what Sean was just, actually his last point, actually writing a really compelling grant application. We hope to have some really good speakers to kind of talk about some key components of the narrative and different pieces that we sometimes like to dive into and talk amongst peers around how to really tackle sometimes difficult areas of a grant application. And then the last part around evaluation and reporting and monitoring, we'll have some experts to talk that through as far as all of the spectrum of evaluation and data tracking and how to maybe try it on for size and test it out. So again, I just wanted to thank you everyone for coming. If you are new to Southern Nevada Strong, or haven't been to an event before, please make sure to drop off a business card so we can stay in contact with you. And stay tuned. We will have the next workshop out by the end of the week. We'll have that email to you. So thank you guys so much. Enjoy your evening.